No, I mean, I think music is just the vehicle that we've chosen. Our job is that we are teaching people about people and hopefully how to be good people, and teaching experience and aesthetic, and music is just our vehicle for that. So,
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jake Walker and Colin Peters for their contributions to the show, and especially to all of you who are listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now for my next guest, Kevin Sedatole. Hi, Kevin.
hello, how are you?
So, Kevin, you're pretty well known in the band community, but for my guests who may not know who you are, can you introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Kevin Sedatole, director of bands at Michigan State University, and glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you are here. You and I were talking before I started recording that, we had initially talked about doing this in January of 2020 at the Missouri Music Educators Association conference, and then the world turned upside down on us, and it hasn't been the same since.
No, but here we are. Glad to be here. Fingers crossed, knock on wood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to put this in time, because these are kind of asynchronous, a lot of people listen to them later, we're doing this interview the very beginning of September of 2021.
Right.
And just to put us in a place and a time. So, Kevin, how is it for you this year so far? Are you having your ensembles as normal?
Yeah, we had our auditions occurred at the beginning of the week that we're currently in, and I had my first rehearsal on Wednesday, and we are running class as normal, socially distanced and using masks, but and bell covers and all that. But this was the first time in our brand new rehearsal hall that we got to have a real full rehearsal, which felt very weird, and for all the right reasons, quite frankly. I mean, it was a little emotional, just because it's you miss making music together in that way. Last year we just did all chamber music, no more than 15 people in the room, and then we had these big breaks and all of that, and just like wasted time, but we had to so the room could refresh and all of that. And so anyway, it's been really terrific to restart, and so.
All right. So, Kevin, will you tell me a little about yourself? What's your musical origin story? How'd you get started in music?
Well, my dad was a band director for his career in Texas, and I just never remember not being around band. I'm the oldest child, and I was on his heels all the time. I remember being in the band hall with him from my earliest memories, in little town in Texas, in southwest of Texas, and then all around. Not southwest Texas, southwest of Houston, and then we moved all around Houston, and I just grew up with it. My brother was a band director too, and so it was and our family is the only one out of all of our extended family that does anything in music, but that was the career that my dad chose, and we just kind of followed him. So
yeah, it's really interesting. my parents were teachers, but not musicians. I'm the first musician teacher in the family. And,
Right.
My son, we had our children a little bit late. And so my son just is starting percussion this year.
Oh,
and
boy.
so I just went down to the local music store and found out that bell kits are hard to find right now. Apparently there's an international bell kit shortage, which isn't a bad thing.
I think there's a percussion shortage, quite frankly, because of all the overseas, and I think a lot of people are dealing with that. So, well, that's funny. It's funny you say that. My son, you're kind of at the beginning, and I'm at the end. My son just finished his doctorate at the University of Texas in conducting.
Uh-huh.
Now he's teaching in the DC area. His wife's in the President's Own. She's a horn player, and he's recently taken a high school job in the DC area. So yeah, it's just real. Our world is so small, our musical world, and so I'm sure we're going to talk about that.
As far as when you were a kid, you were the son of a band director. This is another common theme from a lot of successful band directors, or often it runs in the family. When did you know, or did you always know you were going to be a band director? Was there a moment when you said, I'm going to be a musician?
Yeah, I think that I probably knew, I'd say probably by my 8th grade year that's what I was pretty committed to playing the trumpet, but it was already past that in terms of knowing that I wanted to conduct. And then in high school I was, of course, as many of us, we were drum majors and, the marching band and all of that. And that fed into all of that. And my high school band director really, he let me have opportunities to conduct. And so that fostered something in me, that I just knew, and I couldn't do anything else very well. So that was, that kind of narrowed it down for me. So
your father was not your high school band director?
No, he got out of the business, as many successful band directors did in the mid 70s. He was snatched up by a fundraising company, and hard to turn down the money. And so my 8th grade year, in the middle of the year, he left, and so that never happened. And but anyway, everything happens for a reason.
Another common theme, you're hitting on a lot of things that have come up over and over again in these interviews, is that you were given opportunity as a student. And so how do we give opportunities to students when we're high school band directors or even middle school band directors? What kinds of activities or what kinds of things can we encourage the students to participate in as far as beyond just playing?
Well, I think that, I really encourage people, like when I'm teaching conducting symposiums, and particularly to public school people, I'm like, if you need to involve your students in what you're doing, and first of all, let them know that you are spending your time learning, continuing to develop professionally, and that, as they are going and taking private lessons on their instrument, you're going out and trying to do, to work on your skill and craft and art as well. But to involve them in what you're doing, show them what this means, because if they are an active participant, then they're certainly more apt to buy into noticing. And so I would have more kids learn about conducting, even at an early age, because it's not really about conducting, it's about music. And it's another avenue or venue to teach this, and it's something that's tangible that they could do. I'm not talking about anything like crazy, but so I think it's that I think more people should involve kids at a young age. Like, look, we're going to do some physical things with you. Put your horns down. I'm going to teach you how to do some of this. And I think it would pay large dividends to have, in terms of understanding and then buy-in.
Oh, absolutely. So, I do this with my 4th and 5th graders.
Yeah, well, sure.
I start 4th graders after the new year, but I often invite the kids up to the podium And they can either try to conduct, or if they're kind of a little shy about it, I'll just ask them, just listen and tell me what you hear, but be kind.
Right. Yeah.
And that really helps with them not only kind of buying into the program, but it also helps them to understand what's coming out of their instrument and how they're playing.
Exactly.
When they hear others.
Right.
Yeah. As we all know, anyone who's listening to this knows it's a very different experience behind the horn than it is up on the podium.
Yeah, and no question about it. That's the hardest thing for graduate conductors to understand is how their ears will work. But we make the podium such a sacred place, and that it sometimes becomes this kind of authoritarian kind of place at times. And I think if you were to allow kids to come up and understand what you're doing, then that kind of breaks some walls down too.
I'm old enough now to have had a college band director who was of that authoritarian ilk. He was one of the older. He started conducting in the 50s. Right. So it was a very different mindset from him, and he was very authoritarian. And it's because that was my first college experience. It took a long time for me to kind of get over that idea that you had to be an authoritarian on the podium. But it's pretty much gone away for the most part. I don't know of too many.
No, I don't. That was the model in the 50s. I mean, they were watching orchestral conductors do this, and no, I think things have changed, and models are different, and so I think the teaching style is different. So
how about college? So you decided you were going to be a musician. Where did you head off next after high school?
I ended up at Baylor University. Because of an interaction that I had with Richard Floyd, a name that a lot of people know. And I remember my junior year in high school, Mr. Floyd brought the Baylor Wind Ensemble on tour to Spring High School. By the way, my high school band director is Richard Crane, another fairly famous name. I just want to make sure people know that because that's really important to me. But anyway, Mr. Floyd knew my dad because they were Texas high school band directors, all working at the same time. And so I remember Mr. Floyd came to our house for dinner while the Baylor Wind Ensemble was there. And we just struck up. I'm like, this is somebody I want to be around. And then I heard the Baylor Wind Ensemble play, and I'd never heard an ensemble like that, and I'd never heard that kind of music because he was, this would have been in the late 70s. He was playing, brand new wind ensemble music, not what high school bands were playing, not transcriptions, not whatever the latest Alfred Reed tune was. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that because that's what we were doing, or the latest John Painter transcription, or whatever the case may be. He was playing original wind ensemble music, and there was not, and there wasn't 100 people on stage either. It was 45 people on stage, and it's like, wow, this is something that I've never been around. And he musically, something inside clicked, and I told my dad, I think that's where I want to go to school because I want to study with him. I want him to be one of my mentors, and he has been for the last 40 years now. Unfortunately, he was only my band director for 1 year at Baylor. He left after that and went to South Florida. And then another important name, Michael Haythcock, became my main teacher, who is now the director of bands, as we all know, at the University of Michigan. But he was my main undergraduate teacher. So that's how all that happened. I did a bachelor's in music education, and I think I've got a really, really fine education, a really solid degree, because at the time the Baylor faculty were the ones that not only were they the teachers, but they also taught the methods classes, and every single one of those people had been high school band directors or middle school band directors in some form, particularly the Shanleys and a gentleman, the horn teacher, William Robinson. The music education was such a big deal to them, and and it was so important that the students really learn the instruments. I mean, I feel like you came out of there with a really great amount of knowledge. Now, knowing what to do with it is a whole different other thing, and maybe we can talk about that in a minute. But I do really feel like I got a solid education from Baylor.
So after Baylor, you went to the school?
Well, I taught for 4 years. I taught 2 years in the Klein School District, which is just north of Houston. It's right next door to Spring, with a gentleman named Scott McAdoo, who happened to be my trumpet teacher when I was in high school, and was a fantastic teacher of the instruments. I learned so much. I was only with him for 2 years, but I learned so much about how to teach the instruments. He was a product of course, North Texas. His dad was the famous Maurice McAdoo, who was director of bands in North Texas for many years and very, very successful. But he also was a student of Eddie Green's, who's another very, very famous and impactful teacher in Texas. And that's where Scott really learned how to teach those instruments the way he did. And I just felt, I tried to be as much of a sponge as I possibly could be and absorb all of that, because what I knew from Baylor was now going to be able to put in play because of the teaching concepts that Scott was able to share with me. It wasn't that I had bad information. I had really good information. It was just how to apply it, which is really important. And if I said anything to young people is to, in your first jobs, find a solid mentor teacher that can help you at the beginning, because there's just I always get so scared when a young teacher, their first job, they go out and they're the only person at this school, and I just think about myself, like I don't know if I would know what to do without strong mentors, guiding me. And so, but anyway, I was there for 2 years, and then ended up in Austin. And here's where Dick Floyd comes back into play. I was looking for a job in Austin. It's really difficult to get a job in Austin if you're not from the University of Texas, because all the University of Texas students want to stay there because it's a great place. So I got married that summer, did not have a job, went on my honeymoon, did not have a job, get a call from my dad. I remember I was in Munich, and my dad, I picked up the phone, or whatever you did back then. I don't remember how to answer a phone back then, but he said, I just got a call from Dick Floyd. He said there's a job open at a middle school in Austin, and it just happened to be his wife's assistant, Cheryl Floyd. And I said, well, tell him I'll take it. Tell him I'll take it. He goes, and my dad goes, you don't want to know any more about it? I'm like, no, if Mr. Floyd says that's the job I should take, then that's the one I should take. And that's it. And then Cheryl and I had a fantastic 2 years together. It was so much fun. So those are my 4 years of public school teaching, all at the middle school level, with two really great mentor teachers. Really, really great mentor teachers. My second year of teaching in Austin is when Jerry Junkin arrived at the University of Texas, or re-arrived, I should say. And I felt like I was headed towards University of Michigan, because I wanted to study with Bob Reynolds and do my master's. But then I got to thinking, well, First Disciple just landed in Austin. It would be a lot cheaper for me to go to school at the University of Texas than haul, everything up to Ann Arbor. And I could be in on the ground floor of what I think is something that's going to be very, very special in terms of a conducting program and what's going to go on with the University of Texas Wind Ensemble. And so I applied, and Jerry accepted me, and that's what happened. We were talking about being at the right place at the right time. I think I have been a lot of times, but I also think I've been prepared to accept the opportunities that have been afforded me. I don't think it just happens. I think it happens because you've done the right preparation. It's not just lucky. I think it's when something comes to you, you're able to do it because you're ready to go. And because if I weren't, I'm not sure it would have come. So I don't know. It's a hard thing because a lot of times, and I was like this too. A lot of times, students want things too quickly. Everybody needs I got to have the next best thing, and I got to do this, and quite frankly, I think if everybody would just slow down a little bit and learn your craft better before you try to move on to the next thing, you're going to be better for it. I think some people just move too fast and don't get the amount of experience that you really need to be a more successful, whatever else you want to be, and a more advanced teacher, whether that's a high school band director or a college band director. It's the more years of experience, I believe, make better whatever in the long run. It's as long as they're good years of experience, of course. I more and more now will only take people that have got some teaching experience as conducting students, because you just come in with so much more in your teaching bag, if you will, so.
I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned that idea of landing in a school with a mentor teacher or another teacher who can help you. I took my first teaching job without sort of like jumping into a school that didn't have a band program. I started the program. There's no one else around me. This was the mid-90s, so there was no internet. I was basically alone, and there was just one teacher in the region who kind of like was looking after me a little bit, would call me from time to time. But it was hard, and it went slower than it should have for me. Do you have any thoughts or advice for those teachers who might be in their first job and there's no one around and they're just kind of working through it?
Yeah, you've got to, first of all, the internet is a huge help. Because you can find anything, but it's not the same as really talking to a successful teacher. And so if I were a young person and in a job by myself, I would figure out who in the area, whatever that area might be, who's the most successful person. And can I go observe them, or can I talk to them? Now, observing and talking is pretty easy these days because we have proven it the last year. We're doing it right now, except people don't know that this is video. But
right.
But still, it's not that hard if you just wanted to observe somebody teaching. It's so easy to throw up a Zoom camera now and to be able to do that. So I would say, you don't have to be remote if you've got technology. You can make yourself, you can put yourself in those positions if you have the right technology. But if that's not the case, then I would just start contacting people, and I would use your resource at whatever university you happen to go to. I would go back to your band directors and ask them. They will know who the important people are in the area, who to call, who to connect to. And if those people are not available, then you need to even reach out a little further, because there are plenty of people on Facebook all the time saying, please call me, I will help you. And I find that particularly band directors like to help each other. We like to share information. We're very competitive too, but I still think that there is a want from most teachers to reach out and help folks. I have never had anybody tell me, no, I'm not sharing that with you. You figure out on your, I had to figure it out. You figure it out. I just don't think I think maybe 25, 30 years ago that might've been, but things have changed quite a bit. And I I do believe that people are much more willing to help each other and share ideas, particularly with young teachers. If a young teacher shows energy and want and desire to learn, it's going to be like a fount of information coming up, because people are so happy that people are interested, and showing some want to be better. So.
You made a really interesting point about technology. And, there's been a lot of discussion about how the pandemic is going to change the landscape. And I think maybe the most obvious one is this idea that we can have a Zoom camera in our rehearsal, and that, when I actually can conduct band, if I really needed help with something, I could Skype Brian Balmage and say, hey, Brian, you want to talk to my kids? And there's just so much access to expertise.
Me talking about technology would be, that is so far-fetched, because I think I go backwards every time I turn on my computer. But I do understand the value of it in terms of accessibility. Now, I also think that's one of the dangers of it too, is accessibility, because everybody wants to have a Zoom meeting all the time because we can, but in terms of rehearsing and interaction with composers or conductors, that is all much easier now. And it's much easier for a composer to be with an ensemble, not have to get on a plane. And it's not the same. It's still great to have that interaction, but you could meet with that composer a couple of times. If you were going to have somebody in, you could meet a couple of times before they come in as primers towards that, and the technology is good enough to where the sound quality, particularly if you're wearing headphones, it's okay. You can make comment about the way an ensemble sounds, if the mics are good and placement's good and all of that. And so it's not the same, but I think it's a good tool to be used.
Mm-hmm. At the very least, a 10-minute conversation with a composer can help what we talked about earlier, the buy-in from the students.
Absolutely. And, I did this really crazy virtual Virginia All-State in last April, which I'll never do again, but not because it was Virginia or anything like that. It's just because it was just kind of silly, because you couldn't really hear the ensemble play. But we were doing a John Mackey tune and a Sousa March. So, of course, I had John come in, and those kids went crazy, talking to him. And he was great because he talked about the music, but he also talked about composition and all that. And then for the Sousa March, I had Jason Fettig come in and talk about Sousa, of course, but also talk about the Marine Band and all of that. And that was great. And those kids were very invested in that. So. But it can be done on, it can be done on all levels. We've all learned how to do this year. So those are the things I think are important to learn from what we and some people are still going through, is let's use the things that are valuable and that are successful. Let's don't forget that. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Keep the stuff that's good. So.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Tatum, and I'm the host of Ictus, the Evolving Conductor, a proud member of the Muted Podcast Network. Ictus is your source for any and everything conducting, listening, teaching, and music making. Treat yourself to a dose of musical inspiration as we pick the minds of great conductors and delve into noteworthy repertoire. If you're a musician, teacher, or conductor, you found your people. New episodes are released on Thursdays, and you can find Ictus anywhere you listen to podcasts or ictuspodcast.com. That's IC2US podcast.com.
We touched on it a little bit, and you kind of touched on it, but one of the things that really stands out to me is all of your mentors and all of the people, the great people you've been around, from, Richard Crane and Richard Floyd and Cheryl and Jerry and all these wonderful people in the band community and the band world. And you talked about being, being ready for that opportunity. Again, aiming towards that young band director or that mid-career band director who might be looking to I don't know, maybe go on a graduate school or become more involved. How do you be ready for those opportunities? What do you do to prepare yourself for those opportunities?
Well, I think number one, you need to try to be the best teacher that you can be, meaning know your craft as well as you can for the age that you are and the level of experience that you have. And that means learning, going and seeking and watching other people do at a high level, watch what they do and try to absorb. And I cannot overstate how important it is to be a good teacher. You know, a lot of young people want to get up on the box very quickly, and they want to look like, Jerry Junkin or Bob Reynolds or Larry Ratcliffe or whoever. And that I just pound on kids about, look, that didn't just happen for them. They all understood the craft part of this, but quite frankly, before they got to the art part. And some point, you start blending the art and the craft together. But you cannot have great art without great craft. You can have great craft without great art. And I'm stealing a line from Dick Floyd here. You can have great craft without great art, but you cannot have great art without great craft. And I think that's why you can tell when somebody's a poser on the podium as opposed to somebody that has really done the study and done the work. And that's why it's so important to be a really strong teacher before you start moving towards, okay, I want to do this. Let's just say it's the conducting thing. I think to a person, to a conducting teacher, everybody would say that may be the number one important thing to do. Then I think it's important that you start exposing yourself getting exposed. Don't expose yourself. Get exposed. You have to take that part out.
I will.
Yeah. Putting yourself in other things musically than what you do. So if I were a band director, the last thing I would be listening to is band music. I would be listening to genres outside to where I can learn other things. I would listen to singers, and I would listen to opera for sure. And I would I'd try to find the best instrument, the best person on each instrument and listen, take it in, and don't listen to band composers. Listen to, like, if you don't know Beethoven's string quartets, you don't have to, it's not that you have to like study them intently or intensely. You need to live in the sound. You need to know what that sounds like. You need to know what, the four last songs of Strauss really sounds like. What does it mean to stand beside a Metropolitan Opera singer and to feel what that, I mean, if you have the opportunity to do like it's unbelievable. Things like that is what nurtures your musical depth. And the more you can put yourself into experiences like that, the deeper you're going to be. And of course, the deeper your life experience will be as well. And that's so important that when you get on the podium, you're able to use those. That creates more vulnerability, and that's what it's really all about. But you can't move too quickly through that. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, it sure doesn't.
So.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, the conducting, and I'm going to come back to that what you were just talking about, but I want to go back to the craft idea. I would always take the better teacher over the better conductor if I had to take the balance of the two. But you did mention that you have to have craft. And so I want to talk about that. How do we get better? Do you have any sort of that's a big question, right? Do you have the 30-second advice for the conductor, the wannabe conductor who wants to be better?
Well, I mean, I think you've got to make it a priority. I mean, if you want to get better, then don't practice the things that you're good at. Practice the things that you're not good at.
Can you give me an example? Just nuts and bolts.
Well, like if you, what, because of marching band, I think in many ways, let's just pick a style of conducting. I think a lot of people are way better at marcato conducting than they are legato conducting. Sorry, my dog. I think that you've got to put yourself in a position to practice those things and play music that emphasizes that style. I think more people need to spend. If you want to be a conductor, you have to learn how to move the right way. For some people, movement comes very naturally, and for others, it does not. So if it does not, then you need to get in an environment to where you are able to show some, be more uninhibited, and turn on music and experiment with movement. We have all done this before. Anybody that's been interested in conducting, we have all done this. But for some, you need to get more in touch with what your body can do and not be worried about people looking at you, So this should be something you should do by yourself, but do it in front of a mirror so you can see what you look like. I spent countless hours doing this and trying to train myself. Like, I never felt like my left hand was independent enough. I just was not. And so I would just spend hours focusing on what my left hand would do to different recordings. That's not score study. This is practicing conducting.
Just the actual physical conducting.
Yeah. But I also think, that's the creative part. I also think that some really diligent work through Elizabeth Green exercises that emphasize certain technique are important to do. It's like learning your fingerings as a beginner. You have to practice them until it becomes natural, where we don't think, if you're a trumpet player, you don't think about B flat being first valve anymore. It just is, and you just do that. You don't even think about your fingerings when you play a B flat scale or any scale at that point. Well, that's what this is. It's learning your fundamentals of conducting, both the technical part and the creative part. It's just, you have to spend time doing it. For some people, it takes longer. But if you don't ever do it and you just expect it to happen, it will never happen. It's just not going to. And so what ends up happening is that people are just kind of metronomic on the podium and are showing no stylistic or interpretive things at all. It's just it's all been taught to the ensemble, by speaking and never really by conducting. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was a young conductor, my first couple of years in the classroom, it was always just sort of that, that metronome kind of conducting. And it took a lot of courage, I think, for me to not do that in a situation that mattered, in a concert or at a festival, to let that go, because you get nervous and you revert to what you're, I think there's a certain amount of risk taking you have to do. And
sure. And
you have to practice it in rehearsal, and you have to tell the kids, I may be trying some new things, and if it doesn't work, tell me. Right.
And that's the ensembles, particularly middle school ensembles that only take away the metronome the day before the festival, the concert, they don't understand why it doesn't work. Like, well, first of all, you probably have not even been on the podium. Because middle school teachers tend to walk around the room, even in concert ensemble, not just beginners, but doing their thing. And then all of a sudden they feel like they've got to get up or this whole thing about there's certain things like, we must do it this way. And like, no, you don't. Like all this doing it in, like, counting off an entire bar before the kids start playing. That's the first thing in conducting that you never do, like in fundamentals of conducting, instrumental conducting 1, but my kids have got to have it. I'm like, no, it's not your kids that have to have it. It's you that have to have it. It's the security blanket.
All right. So Kevin, we should probably talk about Michigan State. It is one of the finest music education programs and conducting programs and schools of music. Or is it a college? It's a college of music, right?
College of music. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about your program and, what kinds of exciting things are going on.
Well, I feel like that we are even though we are a large college, we have about 650 majors or something like that, and it's a large graduate school. I do think it's a great place for undergraduate, both music education and performance. We've I would say over the last 10 years, things have maybe whereas Michigan State has always been in the state, I think, the music ed school. For years, it's been that. I do think in the last 10 years, it's slid more. Uh, Balance is the wrong word, but it has skewed a bit more towards performance, where it's more even, perhaps. Um, but I do think we value it, of course, and the band area has definitely always valued it. It's and all the all the very famous directors that have been here. That's always been part of the mantra here, is that because there are a whole lot of teachers that have Michigan State degrees and that sat in this band program from Falcone forward. So, but right now we run three music major ensembles. The Wind Symphony is the top group, and it's basically graduate students. We're very unique here. We have a lot of doctoral students that play in ensembles. That's not to say that there aren't some undergraduates in the top ensemble. If they play really well, there's nothing keeping them from. It's sometimes hard to scratch in that when you're when you're competing against graduate students. Then we have Symphony Band that is a mixture of undergrad and graduate students, but primarily upper level undergrad. And then we have Concert Band, which is mainly freshman and sophomore music ed majors. Then of course we carry a large campus band that's it's the non-audition y'all come play band. And then our athletic band program is huge, with obviously marching band, men's and women's basketball, volleyball band, hockey band, and sometimes whoever in a mixed bag of So it's a very comprehensive kind of band program, and I feel like that, at least in my tenure here, which is now I'm starting year 16, that we try to remain on the forefront of new composition, but we also, we're playing all the newest stuff. I mean, sometimes the ink is not even dry when we get to the performance, but we also respect and honor the tradition that has gone on, not just at Michigan State, but in the band world. And that's important, at least to me, that we continue to honor the things that have made up what have been so important to the band. Like the last year, every single concert, the Wind Symphony did a march, on a different kind of march on every concert, because I just think it's important, and it's important for the students to know that. And they thought it was really cool. Even these jaded grad students that, they thought it was very cool that we were doing these different kind of marches. This coming year in March, we're going to do a whole March concert. It's called March 4th. And it's all different kind of marches, which they're going to be exhausted by the time we get to the end of that. But I also make a point of doing some kind of major transcription of an orchestral work, because that's such an important part of our heritage. And I'm pretty judicious about picking one that I think works really well. Invariably the students and the Wind student, they love doing that, because they like the challenge of playing something that's so difficult. They're sitting there playing the string parts to Till Eulenspiegel or something like that. And there's a certain challenge there. And the other thing is that if any of them are going to take military auditions, this is just, those excerpts are all over the military audition. So, and if they happen to make a band, which we've been very fortunate in the last few years, we've had a number of students make it. They're sitting there, they're playing all that stuff. So I just think it's important that we do that. We obviously play the core repertoire of wind music. I make sure that one of our bands is, Ligature Posey, Hinneman Symphony, the Persichetti. That's all in a rotation that at some point a kid is going to hit, and they're 4 or 5 years in undergrad. So,
yeah, I think that all very important. I like the idea that you said playing new, but also sort of honoring the tradition. I play in a community band. I love that because we play lots of marches. It's just fun. They're fun to play. Of course, I don't play horns, so that helps.
Right. Yeah.
But, I enjoy the march.
Well, and I mean, we don't just run through them and throw it on the concert. I mean, we really work on it and we stylize it the right way. And because I think it's important. I mean, that's the only way that you're going to be able to make sure the students understand that there's value in this, that you work on it. If you just throw it on like an encore, it's just, there's no value to that. So
you talked about transcriptions and that you try to do transcriptions that have value. What are you looking for in those to choose?
Well, I mean, the ones that I do tend to be kind of more like big pieces that are very already wind oriented, that like I would never do a transcription I would never play the transcription of The Rite of Spring, knowing that Stravinsky hated saxophones. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. Or I would never play a transcription of Appalachian Spring when it was never the intent. I mean, the original version is for 13 players, and like that just doesn't make any sense to me. But like we're going to do a big transcription of Feste Romane in November. Well, that's wind oriented music anyway, and so I don't know. I've just learned that from my teachers. I know what it's like. Audiences respond so well to that, and I just think you have to have a good balance of things for the players and the audience. I mean, if you're going to play Circus Maximus, you need to balance that for the audience, particularly with something else that might be from a more more traditional genre, and that's kind of how I do it.
It's I think, do you ever run the risk of getting too big with your transcriptions? Because I mean, obviously some of these pieces, they're core to an orchestral concert. You can't do Alpine Symphony, for example.
No. I mean, the biggest one that I've ever done is maybe All the Pines of Rome or something like that.
That's pretty big.
I did do it when I was not here, but I was guest conducting a band in Taiwan, and I did the entire Mahler First Symphony with that band, and as I'm doing it, I'm just, this is weird.
The composer in me, I'm so hot and cold on transcriptions because I also believe the original intent, that composer was hearing an orchestra.
No question about it.
So I think, but there are good ones.
But also you got to remember that the composer also might not have known what a band really is, and certainly what a current band is. So that kind of leads to it's still in the transcription vein, but my students and a couple other studios around the country want their doctoral projects are actually doing transcriptions orchestral to winds, but the intent is to find either a major composer that is not written for winds very much, to try to entice them, to show them what their music can sound like, and then try to get an original piece, or trying to get underrepresented composers more represented through transcription or whatever. But it has paid a lot of dividends with major composers. It has attracted. That's why John Curliano did Circus Maximus, because he heard transcriptions of his work and was convinced the band could do this. Same for Bill Bolcom, and we haven't quite got John Adams there yet, but maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't mean to sound like I don't like transcriptions at all. And of course, there's a long tradition of creating arrangements, of piano music
Sure.
and you were kind of talking about this bringing other composers of other genres into the band world, and we know Caitlin Bouvet did the thing of Carolyn Shaw, the Pulitzer winning piece. Yeah. I can't think of the title on top of my head, but
yeah, I don't. Yeah,
it won the Pulitzer Prize. I know that.
Yeah, and that's great, and and hopefully it will entice her to like, hey, and here's the other thing: it's not just the bands sound really good, but band people are cool, and they treat composers well, far better. No offense to orchestral people, but far. Bill Bolcom told me, he goes, "You do not understand how much better we are treated from the band world than we are in the orchestral world." He goes, I was the resident composer for the New York Philharmonic, and I barely got my name on a program, and I was the last one to be asked about my own composition.
All right, we've been going for a little bit of time. You touched on it a little bit. You want to talk about any working with composers, the value of working with composers?
Sure. There's nothing like, at least for me, working on a brand new piece with the composer right beside you, and watching that person, that particular composer, kind of like, it's almost, it's all of a sudden this thing is giving birth, it's like, oh my God, it's here, and is it a boy or a girl? Honestly, because as a composer, you don't always know. You just don't know how it's really going to sound, even though midis are, no, it's not. And and then being able to interact with that composer and getting it exactly how the composer wants it to go. That's really what's really cool. We have some great composers here, who I've been able to collaborate with all of them, and they all work in different ways, but that interaction with the composer and the ensemble and that immediacy, and when something clicks and the composer's like, that's it, that's the thing. And kind of watching that process happen up until the concert. And what's even cooler is when you get to record the piece too, because that's a whole nother level of preparation and fine tuning. And, but there's just, working with a composer is that collaborative relationship where, and particularly when the composer really trusts the conductor and the ensemble, it's really magical, I think. And the piece takes on a different, well, I don't know if it's different because in many cases it's the only one, but it's a really unique experience. And the growth from the ensemble, not just musically, but as people, because of that interconnectivity, I think that may be the most important aspect of all of that.
One bit of advice or one thing you want to say to a high school band director who's listening, or a middle school or even beginning elementary band director, what do you want them to know right now?
What I'd like to say to them is that remember why you got in this. Remember the joy part of why you got in this. Remember that in most days we can find something that is so positive about what we do, and when so many other people cannot do that. We could be sitting in a cubicle crunching numbers and hating life. We might be making a whole lot more money, but we would not love what we're doing. So our riches come in other ways. And that connection that you get to see and work with kids every single day is something that's really special and that we should not take for granted. And I think the very best teachers truly understand that is by far what's the most special. It's that interaction with the kids and watching them grow. in whatever form that takes and whatever activity we might be doing. The other things, the main thing I would say to young teachers is to slow down. Don't be in such a hurry. Slow down, because it and allow yourself to learn your craft in a way that prepares you to really excel when it's time. But you don't have to be the greatest immediately, just take your time. And then to old directors, don't worry about stupid stuff.
Well,
we get so worried about the stupidest things. And I'm as guilty as anybody. Like I used to stress out about the dumbest things, and I'm not doing that anymore. It is not, whether this happens or not is not going to affect me in any way. And it's out of my control anyway. So why let it, fester so long? Just let it go. I mean, so anyway, that's what I would say.
Hey there. My name is Dr. Garrett Hope. I am a composer, coach, podcaster, and speaker. I've been focused on building my music business since 2014 and helping others build theirs since 2015. I want to tell you about the second annual Ultimate Music Business Summit we are organizing. It'll take place early January of 2022. There will be dozens of presentations with highly actionable content, all of it available to you so you can start your business, grow your business, and ultimately make more money. Because here's the deal. Unless you earn all of your income from an employer, you are a self-employed small business owner. And if you want to do more than survive, if you want to grow your audience, or if you want to impact more people, you have to think and act like a business owner. And that means this summit is for you. This summit will give you real-world, not theoretical, strategies you can implement immediately. You don't need to be stuck with fear or living in your failures. I promise you, with all the teachers lined up, you will get something you've never thought of before. Even though building a business is hard, no one is promising it's easy. It is possible. You just need the right tools and strategies. Tickets for this virtual event will go on sale soon. To be the first in line and to get more information about the summit, presenters, and more, go to musicsummit.biz. That's musicsummit.biz, and add your email to the list.
all right, Kevin. So the next group of questions, my enlightened round, they're big questions, sort of philosophical questions about our profession and things that are maybe problems or challenges for us or not, depending on, who you are and what situation you're in. But the first of these is often controversial. Not as controversial as people want to make it, though, I think. And that's where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition?
I think it becomes unhealthy when all you're interested in is winning. To me, winning is a byproduct of great teaching and experience. Getting a first division or a trophy is a byproduct of doing good things in terms of teaching and experience. When you turn that on its head and only focus on we have to win, then that becomes it's not an artistic experience. Then it becomes an athletic experience. And there's nothing wrong with athletics, but that's not what we're supposed to be about. We're teaching music education. And so that's when, unfortunately, that tends to be that draws people in as that competition. And parents parents get in on that as well. And then you create a monster. But it's your job. You're the educator. You're the music educator. You're the professional person. And so you're the one that has to kind of dictate how are we going to define success? Is it going to be because of that trophy, or is it going to be because we have created something that's meaningful and it has an aesthetic to it, and you're going to know about this for a long time? you're going to forget about a trophy that you won. You know, when you're our age, or my age anyway, you know, I couldn't tell you what we won, but I can tell you the experience I had with music, though. I can do that. So that to me, I'm not against competition. I love it. I love it, but for the right reasons. Like, man, did you hear how they shaped that phrase on the field? And man, what they are doing goes so well with the music and blah blah blah. There's people have given thought to this, and and that can be, listen, it's just as bad on the concert side when ensembles have been so spoon fed to the extent that there is no spontaneity in what they do, and that is the point. That's the point. Then you've lost. That's where competition is just it's become something else, and it's dangerous because it's not art. So,
second question here is a challenge for a lot, but then again, over the years I found that you don't necessarily need a balance if your life is sort of balanced right. And so how do you find a work-life balance as a music educator?
I'm not sure I've always achieved that the right way, but I've gotten way better at it in the last maybe 8 or 9 years. I think it's really, really important that you have likes and interests outside of what you do on a daily basis. If you only live, eat, sleep, band, then you're going to be, I don't know how you won't get burnt out. I just don't know how you do it, or spend the appropriate amount of time with your family, or when it's all consuming like that. It also doesn't make a well-rounded person. Like, it is so important that you walk out of that arena and go find what's important to you in your avocation, your love, your hobby. I often do this at symposiums. I'll go around to all the conductors, like, tell me what your thing is outside of your thing. Tell me your thing. And I want to know, and in that thing, I want to know who's at the top of the thing. Like, so if photography is your thing, okay, who's the top photographer?
Oh, interesting.
If wine is your thing, who's the best winemaker? If cooking is your thing, who's the best chef? Who's the chef that who's your go-to? And what I do is talk about, okay, are those things the things that make those people the top of their field, are they the same things that make people at the top of music? Are commonalities, which of course there are. I said that it's important that you have experiences and quality experiences outside of music making, because that's how you build your personal depth. It also has how you keep your sanity, is that you have to have things that are maybe they're definitely contributors to what you do, but maybe not. I've got really good friends that, man, they are big time music educators, but they're also big time campers and hikers, and they love doing that, and it's their escape, and they create great balance, and and you have to make it a priority to do that. You have to plan it out. Like, I've got to have escape time so I'm a better teacher when I come back,
Yeah, I think there's people conflate, because for most people, music is something they love, but it's
right.
A hobby. And I think people conflate our profession versus their hobby.
Yeah.
And we even do it within our profession. It's like, but I love music. Yeah, well, I do too, but I want to do other things sometimes.
Right. I agree. I mean, don't you want to go to aren't you going to go to the DCI show? I'm like, no, I'm not going to go to the DCI show. I love it, but I don't need that. I go about once every 5 years. So that's all I need. because I'd rather go do something else that, you know.
Kevin, my wife and I both have doctorates. She's a performer. I'm a teacher, composer. We don't have a stereo system. We don't listen to music in the house.
Right.
I don't go to her concerts anymore unless it's really special, and she doesn't come to mine unless it's really special. It's just you can't.
Yeah.
You have to be away from it.
Yeah, I listen. I mean, I like to listen to music, but it's not what you think I would be listening to.
Yeah, no, me too. Exactly. And then when I am listening to what you think I'm going to listen to, I do it with a very specific purpose.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
This is the big question, and it gets answered in so many different ways. What do you believe are the challenges facing music ed or band, and how do we meet them? Any solutions for them?
Well, first of all, I know that there is a push in our country, or there has been, particularly in higher education, music education, that the large ensemble dictates too much in terms of music education. And I've sat on panels about this. I've kind of been in battle royals about this. I spend not a lot of time worrying about that because, as far as I can tell, large ensemble is pretty healthy within the public schools. Not all public schools. I mean, you can definitely find areas, particularly in the inner city, where things are, I mean, it's pretty desperate. But I don't think that's not the fault of large ensembles. That's the fault of a whole lot of other things and maybe in those areas, large ensembles is really not the way to do music education, that we have to find other, because they don't have the finance to be able to do, they don't have the not wherewithal, but I guess it's the financial part is the biggest deal. It's just they don't have the monies to be able to afford to do that. But that doesn't mean you can't have music education. You just have to have it in a different way. But in places where you can, I see it thriving. I see organizations that celebrate particularly public school music thriving, I think. And it's hard to say that because of what we're going through with COVID, but things like Midwest Clinic and Music for All and DCI, if you will, and most state organizations and all state programs, and those are all thriving. So I just don't worry too much about that part of it. What I worry about is a little bit of the negativity that comes from people that are teaching in higher ed in terms of that, because I don't know if I don't know if it's an appreciation thing. I don't know if it's their standing in the pecking order at college faculties. But I encourage our people and other music ed people, don't be part of the problem, be part of the solution. Connect yourself. Part of the problem is that music ed students don't get connected to music ed faculty till far later in their program. A lot of times it's not until their junior year. Well, okay, the band directors, the orchestra directors, particularly the band directors, they are seeing these people every day. If you're a marching band, at least in the Big Ten, you're seeing these people every single day. And then you see them in ensemble, and then you're going to see them in conducting class. And then so of course, the band directors or the conductors are going to have some influence on these students. It's just the nature of the beast. The other thing is that, and a lot of people don't like to hear that, but it's true. Nobody goes to undergrad school for a music education program. Oh, I'm going there because the music ed professors are great. That's not why they're going. They're either going because the ensemble is great, the ensemble program is great, or they're going for a studio teacher. They're going to study because they want to study trumpet with blah, 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 and I'm going to be in this great band program. And yeah, I think I take music ed classes, but I couldn't even tell you who teaches that. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. That's not making anybody second class or anything like that. That's just the way it is. I just couldn't tell you a high school kid would ever select a school because they might know that it's great music ed, but when they describe what great music ed is, they're probably going to say, they'll say they got great bands. That's how they're going to describe it. So the other problem I think that we have is that there's this huge schism in practicality and conceptual theory. There's a huge schism, and we don't have many people that can bridge that.
When you say conceptual theory, what do you mean precisely?
Well, I mean, the research,
educational theory,
okay. That seems for me to be it keeps moving further and further away to what happens really in the classroom. And sometimes the only people that are listening to that are the people that are in that higher ed and it becomes this kind of circle of talking to each other, but you're not talking to the people down here. And when we do talk to them, it's largely not about teaching. It's about helping them politically, with the state legislature, and your rights are this, but it does, and that's all important. I'm not saying it's not, but it's rarely about the actual teaching. And we need to be hiring more practitioners.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in and kind of not the devil's advocate, but just kind of like offer maybe some thoughts, because I've been thinking about this a lot too. It's really been on my mind a lot lately. And I think, some of it goes back to what we talked about by trying to be 100% of the band, having that perfect score. I think the large ensembles are healthy. I agree with 100%. There's nothing we should do to the large ensembles, but I think we need more music teachers. Why don't we have general music teachers in middle school and high school doing modern band?
Of course.
Doing electronic music. Why can't we have a teacher who teaches band and a teacher who runs the electronic music ensemble?
Right. Because
this to me is the issue.
No, I agree. And that was the point I was trying to make with these people. Just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
Why would you get rid of something that's so successful? That doesn't mean you can't add on to it.
Yes, it's right. So this is how I look at it. And I think this is I don't know. This is my perspective on what it would be healthy. Is you keep the band, and let's say the number that's been thrown around is 20%, right? We talk about the other 80%. So you have that 20% who are committed and invested in large ensembles, choir, band, orchestra. So let's offer other things in addition to those so that we can get the percentage of students involved in music up without taking the 20% and just tossing them away.
Right.
It's because we want to be more inclusive, but I think resources is where it comes down to.
It is. Yeah, it is resources. Yeah, and that's the point I was trying. I went in when I went and spoke to this music ed conference thing. I'm like, look, your ideas are great, but they all cost money.
That's the reality.
Every time you splinter off into another thing, and we're going to have this and this and this, and it's hard to sell that to public school administrators because they see, you want me to hire more teachers,
So this seems like the pain point for advocacy for us, right? As a profession.
Sure.
How do we get more jobs in the school so that we're not the only teacher in a school?
Yeah.
How is it that, when you start a job and you're a new teacher, that whoever's helping the classroom teachers can't help you because they don't know anything about music.
Right.
And so you're left alone while all the other classroom teachers are getting mentors dropping in all day.
Sure.
It's like, it's all tied together, I think.
No, I agree. I agree.
It's a big, a big onion to unpeel.
Yeah. And some states do it better than others.
And it's interesting. There's a program in Ohio. I think it's Lebanon, Ohio, Southern Ohio, and he was a band director at the school, but he was more interested in doing electronic music. So now he has a whole ensemble. The kids do performances, but he was doing so well with that they hired another music teacher to be the band director, so he could go off and do that.
No kidding.
And so we need to like hold those models up.
Sure.
And say,
Yeah.
look what the music education is doing for more than just the band kids.
Right. Well, I think the really smart, let's say the band director, the people that are learning, they're figuring out, I need to branch this thing out because if I want, these kids have got more interest than just playing the euphonium in my ensemble.
Yeah.
I need to somehow figure out, like, let's do some garage band, or let's do something that's more alternative. And I mean, not all the time, but splinter out so you keep those kids, in your thing, but you're also you're showing them number one, that you value what their interests are.
Yes.
That's really important, and that you're connecting to what's important to them. That interest thing is real important. Like, be interested in them outside of your ensemble. Because then all of a sudden they become people, and just instead of just members of.
And you become a person other than that weirdo who connects to the band.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
What is it? They're like the bands on one side of the street, the rest are on the other side of the street. If you can get them just to cross over little bit. Yeah, no, there's a lot to it. I just think, it's resources again. Schools don't want to hire more teachers. And the teachers who are there are usually overburdened already.
No question.
A typical high school band director isn't going to be able to take on more.
Not in most states.
So
not every state. But.
Yeah, no, right. So yeah, I mean, it always comes down to resources in the end, doesn't it?
Of course.
All right, Kevin, I appreciate that conversation because that's really on my mind too. It's like we're thinking alike here. My favorite question. If I invented a time machine and I offered to take you back to the afternoon of your high school graduation, what advice would you offer to yourself?
Be more aware. Listen to what you're told. Absorb more. Practice more. Go to class more, particularly 8 o'clocks. I am hell on wheels here when I see the methods classes going here. I'll go in and check on students like, why weren't you in clarinet class earlier today? And I see in the hallway. Oh, I'm like, no, you don't understand. You might have missed the most important day on that instrument because you decided to sleep in.
Yeah, what if that's the day you're talking about going over the break?
Yeah. And it's
for
the
the
one
rest
day
of your career, you're like struggling to teach kids to go over the break.
Or they're talking about the perfect embouchure.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you cannot afford, you have to know this stuff.
Yeah.
They're just, or I'll go in and quiz them on clarinet. Show me how to, give me 2 fingerings for this note. What do you do? What do you do with your right hand when you play A on the clarinet? What do you do? They're like, how do you know all this stuff? I'm like, because I did this stuff.
And why do you do that with your hand?
Right. Yeah. That's the stuff that I wish that what I know now. And I always tell them, like, the only reason I'm saying this is I experienced all of this. And I wish I could go back and redo it. But every person would say something like that.
All right, Kevin, if you had a choice, what would be the final work you'd want to conduct?
I looked at this question earlier and I'm like, I don't even know how.
It doesn't have to be a band piece. It can be anything. I've got.
But I'm a band director, so I guess probably I wouldn't say this is the best piece of music I've ever conducted, but but in terms of the experience and the what was created, and I've now done this piece 3 times. But the Corelliano Circus Maximus is a piece that is so engaging and so well built. The architecture of the piece is incredible. And it's one of those things that pulls you in and out emotionally. And then it's like running a freaking marching band in the concert hall. I mean, you do have the marching band, but I mean, just the complexity of the piece, and there's so much going on. You feel it feels to me you're almost conducting opera, but without the singers because of the activity that's going on around the hall. And that's very satisfying as a conductor. And that's the other thing I would I would love to conduct La Boheme from the pit. I mean, that, musically to me, that's just like, oh my God, it doesn't get any better than this. But in terms of band, I think that, I've had a lot of just fantastic experiences, but that one experience in Carnegie Hall for me doing that piece and with him sitting in the audience was really, it was pretty special. So.
Yeah, you're right. It's the memories associated with it, not necessarily the piece itself.
I think the piece is good music. I'm not sure it's great music musically, but aesthetically what it does in terms of the event of the piece is, and the other thing that's important about that piece is the influence it had on so many other composers. So.
All right, Kevin, is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote for the listeners?
Yeah. We're doing a really, let me just go back a little bit. I think that we've experienced something in the last 18 months, not pandemic oriented, although the pandemic has let us all think about this, but what's happened in terms of diversity and, the way because of Black Lives Matter and all that's happened, our shift in focus is different across university campuses. And we have made a real push to change, to be more aware in our programming, more diversified, more underrepresented composers, and not just as a token, but for real. But we are doing this concert in February 5th. We're going to take the Wind Symphony to Detroit. We're going to do a performance at the Detroit School for the Arts in honor of Black History Month. And all of the composers are African American. A very, very eclectic program from the newest thing that I can find. We're going to do the Kevin Day's Concerto for Wind Ensemble, which young African American composer. Really, just we're going to close the concert with Omar Thomas's "Come Sunday" because it just doesn't. I mean, that is such compelling music. One of my students has transcribed William Dawson's Negro Folk Symphony, which we are currently doing the first movement of right now. And we'll do the whole thing because that is an underrepresented piece in the repertoire. I mean, it's not taking its place like it should have, because he just wasn't a prominent composer, period. Even within the African American composers. But the music is really great, and then we're just gonna do a variety of music, and it's going to be for the Detroit Public Schools, and I think it's an important performance, but it's not something that's the only thing we're doing all year. That's not the point. The point is that we're trying to take MSU to Detroit and be part of that community, because it's really hard to bring Detroit to Michigan State. It just doesn't, because of many of the things we've been talking about. It's just not it for whatever reason, and there are many. So we just we're going to flip this over and we're going to go to them. We're going to go to those programs, and so.
All right, Kevin, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, we're on. If you just go to the College of Music, MSU College of Music website, I'm there, but. Email is the best way, for sure. And I'm always on Facebook. So,
Kevin, I really appreciate your time. This was a great conversation. I enjoyed it a lot.
No, it was a lot of fun. So thanks for having me.